You are now listening to 1-900 Old Ladies, The Lost Art of Making Lefse, written by Ellie Starr, narrated by the author. Post-production by Pinto Media. Chapter 18. Now, you take your log of dough and you slice it into coins, yeah? 6 usually do the trick. That way, your lefse is not too big and not too thin. Then you place 1 dish on your flour board, sprinkle with the flour, and start to roll. Remember, you got to have your special lasso rolling pin with the grooves. Roll carefully from the center out to the edges, but don't press too hard when you get to the edges. Your bread will need to be round in shape and the same thickness all the way around, see? If it's too thin on the edges, your edges will get crispy and crack. Same thickness all the way around. Yeah, cool. Just like that. Well, maybe that's not perfectly round, but that's a good start, eh? Sigrid Sievertson. Marge Carter stood at the kitchen sink. She stared out the window, thoughtfully engrossed in the details of her own dilemma as she dried the small rack of newly rinsed dishes. She held up Ellie's lefse pin. This was a special rolling pin which her sister used for rolling out the potato flatbread. Lefse rolling pins differed from conventional rolling pins in that they had to be purchased at a special supplier of Norwegian cookery. Like a regular rolling pin, a standard lefse pin was made of hardwood, usually maple, but it also had a series of grooves etched into the surface. This enabled one to roll the soft potato dough down to a consistently thin thickness. A skilled maker of lefse knew that perfectly made flatbread was extremely thin, not nearly as thick as a tortilla or pita wrap. If the lefse was not rolled out thinly enough, it came out like shoe leather. This special rolling pin enabled the sprinkled flour to reach deep inside the grooves of the pin to keep the dough from sticking as one rolled it out. As a result, it created fine ridges on the bread. She retrieved a mesh sleeve from the kitchen drawer. I guess, since Ellie isn't here, we won't be needing this anytime soon. I'd better put it away. She examined the pin one last time before inserting it into its protective cotton glove. She noted its particularly worn appearance. This sucker looks like it's been beat to hell, she thought. Maybe I'll buy Ellie a new one. Yeah, definitely. If I get us out of this mess, I will definitely buy my sister a new lefse pin. As a matter of fact, if I get us out of this mess, we can make lefse every day. She leaned over the sink in despair as she recited a short prayer in her head. Margie was not a religious woman. She hadn't set foot in a church for over 20 years. But her younger sister was a faithful parishioner of Himmel Lutheran and had attended Sunday services all her life. Marge wanted to entreat God for help, but not for her own sake, for the sake of her sister. God, I know you're up there. If you hear me, help me save my little sister Ellen. She has been so good all her life. She's all I have and I can't lose her. Give me the strength I need to help her out of this disastrous chain of events. Don't do this for me, Lord. Do it for my little sister. Oh, and by the way, God, I'm still pissed at you for taking John away from me, but we can talk about that later. Amen. Marge ended her prayer and turned, leaning her backside against the sink. She wiped a tear from her eye, grateful that no one was present to witness her moment of weakness. Then she decisively shook off her blues, determined to set out for the day's chores. She had to drive to town today. She needed to hang flyers for the auction to be held in 2 days. She and Stan had prepared a list of all Stanley's items to be auctioned off, which included the time the auction was to begin. She grabbed up her hammer, nails, jar of thumbtacks, and a stack of flyers and headed out the front door. Ellie picked up the phone receiver to her nephew's kitchen wall phone and placed a call to her farmhouse in North Dakota. As she punched out the 11-digit number on the touch-tone phone, she thought to herself, "Isn't it delightful? Everybody in the world has their own unique touch-tone jingle." This newfangled technology was nothing like the rotary wall phone or even the cordless sets that Margie had purchased for the 900 numbers. She sat patiently as the house phone rang. Rosa answered. Hi, Rosa, dear. It's Mom. How are things going up there? Ellen asked. Rosa was glad to hear from Ellen. It had been almost a week since she left with little Robert. Her daughter-in-law informed her that she really didn't have time to talk because the 900 line was ringing. She briefly asked Ellie how little Robert was doing. Oh, hon, he's such a joy. He's a very good boy. He and Grandma are getting along just fine. The young Mrs. Peters was relieved to hear that her son was doing well. Listen, hon, I know your other line is ringing. Is Margie there? Rosa called Margie to the line. Ellen grinned broadly. Hi, Marge. Goodness, it's good to hear your voice. Yeah, hon, I'm having a marvelous time out here. It's so different from how I remember. Margie asked her sister about her tour of the newly opened Mall of America. Oh, yeah, it's huge. Big as can be. Almost too big. Of course, they've got lots of froofy stores, but they got an amusement park and picture shows all right there in the mall. They must be 4 or 5 stories of wall-to-wall stores. I've never seen anything like it. Oh, and Marge, hon, you'd never believe this. They've got one store with just refrigerator magnets. That's it. All they carry in the entire store is magnets for the icebox. My goodness, it's just the most fascinating thing I've ever seen. Oh, yeah, little Robert is just a joy. Now, Margie, I don't mean to brag, but he really is the most precious thing alive. He's even starting to talk. I think I can get him to say Grandma before long. Oh, and he's so darn bright, just like his papa. Yeah, we went to the Como Park Zoo with Joseph's girls. Oh, Marge, they're just so darling. We saw the tigers and zebras. I think Robert enjoyed the sea lions best. Melinda and I and the kids just had a ball. It was nice going to the park, with little ones this time. Say, hon, how's it going over there? Are you lonely? Ellie inquired of her sister. Marge answered evasively that she had been dating someone since Ellie left for Minnesota. Ellen giggled. You don't say. Well, tell me, who is he? Where did you meet him? Margie explained that she met some guy in Bismarck, and he had been calling the 900 line. Well, are you serious about him? Ellie asked, a little cautious. Margie replied that she didn't really know how she felt about him, but that he was a nice-looking doctor. She hadn't decided whether it was serious enough to give him her address and phone number. For now, he would be calling her on the 900 line. Oh, I know, dear. You just can't be too careful anymore, Ellie agreed. Say, Margie, how are Stan and Rosa doing? Margie stated that Rosa was answering the 900 line for her so that she didn't have to be anchored to the phone so much. She was doing very well. At first, Stan Jr. didn't like the idea. But Marge noticed that because Rosa had to talk about sex all day and she didn't have to stay up with the baby all night, Stan might be getting a little more action in the boudoir as of late. Ellie seemed a bit embarrassed. My gosh, did you ask him about that? Margie informed her sister that she did. She had no problem asking her nephew about the specifics of his sex life with Rosa. Stan told Marge that, even though he was initially against Rosa answering the 900 line, he resolved that he could, quote, take the crumbs any day, end quote. Ellie giggled again. Well, dear, I don't want to bore you with this stuff. Joseph bought me one of these disposable cameras, so I have plenty of pictures to bring back. See you in a few days, hon. Marge stood in the farmhouse kitchen after hanging up the kitchen wall phone. She groaned as she hung the receiver in its cradle. Then she rolled her eyes, leaned up against the door jamb, and banged her forehead on the wall. What's the matter, Marge? Rosa asked. I just got done talking for 20 minutes with my sister about refrigerator magnets, she exclaimed, frustrated. And to top that off, she really is convinced she's been to Minnesota before. You didn't remind her that she's never been anywhere? Rosa inquired. No, I don't even bother correcting her anymore. She lives in her own little world. There's no point, Margie answered. She threw her head back and whined. Oh my God, Rosa. What the hell am I going to do about her? Once again, Jim McDaniel called the 900 number to set up a date with Margie. He wanted to see her tomorrow because he would have to work late tonight on several cases he had backlogged. Margie had informed him that time wouldn't work for her because they had an auction scheduled for the following day. Ultimately, they agreed to meet late that evening, about 10 p.m. Jim thought that he might be able to finish up his pending workload by 9 o'clock. After that, he could rush home quickly and shower. Marge could meet him at the apartment then. Marge agreed to meet him at his apartment that evening, but in reality, she had a much more devious plan in store. She was running out of time, and she needed to dig for information from Jim about Stanley's death. She thought about the various sex spy stories she had heard of in the news during the Cold War. She found the idea intriguing. Had she not been happily married to John all those years, perhaps she might have been a successful sex spy. She remained faithful to John during their entire 40-year marriage. But she also knew that she could be a lioness in the bedroom. She relished the idea of circling her prey thoughtfully and viciously going in for the kill. The idea of using her feminine wiles to fight for a cause greater than herself intrigued her. But the truth was that, although Margie liked to tell herself and others that she was a heartless vixen, she had a very soft interior. She allowed only rare individuals the opportunity to catch a glimpse of who she really was, on even rarer occasions. Her late husband and her 4 children knew that she wasn't a vicious lioness. They knew she was a domesticated pussycat. Her sister Ellen knew that as well. But no one else really understood Marge's vulnerable side. She was much too guarded to show any outward signs of weakness. If she became overwhelmed or frustrated about things, she simply masked her feelings behind a veil of anger or violence. Marge had resolved to meet Jim, but she wasn't going to meet him on his terms at his apartment, as they agreed. She wanted to show up at his work 2 hours early. Perhaps she could get some information about Stanley. Maybe she might find out if Stanley was murdered, and if he was, how he was murdered. If Ellen did kill Stanley, maybe Marge could sufficiently charm Jim into falsifying the report to save her sister. Ellen was all that Margie had now. She wasn't about to give her sister up to the authorities for what, admittedly, should have been done to Stanley Peters 27 years ago.